Well, welcome everyone. My name's Paul Ellis. I'm just going to welcome you to an evening with Janet Mumford, and we'll be speaking about peering into the world of women. And I'm going to read these poems out that are really beautiful and will help kind of seed the ground for our conversation this evening. If you give a mum a muffin, if you give a mum a muffin, she'll want a cup of coffee to go with it. She'll pour herself some. Her 3-year-old will come and spill the coffee. Mum will wipe it up. Wiping the floor, she will find dirty socks. She'll remember that she has to do the washing. When she puts the washing into the machine, she'll trip over shoes and bump into the freezer. Bumping into the freezer will remind her she has to plan dinner. She will get out some mints. She'll look for her cookbook, how to make 100 things with mints. The cookbook is sitting under a pile of mail. She will see the phone bill, which is due tomorrow. She will look for a checkbook. The checkbook is in her purse, which is being dumped out by her 2-year-old. Then she'll smell something funny. She'll change the 2-year-old. While she's changing the 2-year-old, the phone will ring. Her 5-year-old will answer and hang up. She'll remember she was supposed to phone a friend to come over for coffee. Thinking of coffee will remind her she was going to have a cup. She will pour herself some more, and chances are, if she has a cup of coffee, her children will have eaten the muffin that went with it. And our other poem for connection with it is Wild Geese by Mary Oliver. Wild Geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clear blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. But without further ado, I'm going to hand over to the wonderful Janet Mumford to take us through tonight's conversation on peering into the world of women.
Thank you, Paul. I'm just going to attempt to share screen. Just hold on 2 seconds. See if that will work. Why are we not working? I might have to get you to, is it not?
Just click into, are you in PowerPoint? Try and click, is that not clicking on it and not working?
Clicking onto the PowerPoint.
I can, and then is it working?
In a slideshow.
Press Shift F5 as well is another thing.
Shift
F5.
I don't have F. Got a 5.
5, yeah, try that. I don't know what Macs do. How about I try? Oh, there we go.
Hang on. I think we had it for a minute. Where did it go? Okay, hang on. We're just gonna go, there we go. See if that works. All right, can everybody see that? We good? Yep. Tech is not my strong point. I could tell you lots of funny stories about me and tech. So thank you for having me. I'm going to talk tonight, peering into the world of women, a little bit about a woman's journey. I thought I'd just start with how did I come to be part of Centre for Men. So I'm a counsellor, one of the many that are part of Centre for Men. I was studying counselling in my 40s and needed to do my first placement. I'd broken my wrist quite badly, so I couldn't drive, I couldn't go out. And I was in a bit of an Eeyore place because I had tried numerous places requested if I could do a placement there, and they'd all either not replied or come back with a very emphatic no. And in the end, my husband started Googling, just trying to find somewhere. He found what was then Men Transforming Men. And I said to him, sweetie, this is Men Transforming Men. I don't think they're going to want a female counsellor. But he said, look, they've got a women's group running. And I, at the time, was running some women's groups. And so he said, you know, why don't you apply? So I sent off a message, email, and got the shock of my life when the secretary there rang me and said, yes, Rob Jones would like to have an interview with you. And even then I was sort of like, well, I'm a female. I don't think I'm really what he wants. And she said, no, he wants to meet you. And so I went down and had an interview with him, and he offered me the placement, which also included a year of weekly mentoring with him. Anyway, we had the interview. He explained a bit about what Men Transforming Men was all about, and did that sit well with me? And I was very interested. One of the things I'd said to my husband when I was looking to find a place to do a placement, I said, I want it to be somewhere, I want them to see my heart, because that was the most important thing to me. And when we got to the end of the interview, Rob Jones said to me, I wanted to meet you to see your heart. And so for me, that was the confirmation that, yes, this was the right place for me to be. And my journey, so that was 12 years ago. So I've continued to meet with Rob Jones and am part of the group supervision that Richard Fay and Rob Jones and David Clough and many others are involved with, that meets monthly. So, and this year I've started attending an evening with. So I've certainly had a connection for a while with Centre for Men, even though probably for most of you, my face is fairly new. Okay, let's just the next slide. So I'm going to use babushka dolls. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them or not, but they're little dolls that sit inside each other to talk about the women's journey tonight. So women's journey is a little bit different to men, and some of you that you might find some real resonance with some of this feminine journey. So it's not exclusive, but our journey tends to be one of descent rather than ascent initially. So most of you would be familiar with the men's journey, which is one of ascent, and later on the crisis of limitation, and then descent. For women, our journey tends to start with descent much earlier on in life. I just want to acknowledge right from the start that we will have all been hurt and wounded by women. I certainly have had some very deep wounds from women, and I'm sure you have too. And I just want to hold that space and honour that wounding can be incredibly hurtful and traumatic as well. And women, whilst they have parts of themselves that are wonderful, also can be quite harmful as well. I enjoy working with men and women. Most of my experience is with women. I have 2 brothers, and I'm not a man hater. So when I give this presentation, I would encourage you to listen from the heart. So I'm talking about what it's like for a woman, not as a criticism, but just merely as this is what it is. Obviously, I'm speaking very generally. I'm not speaking for every single woman. If you've known one woman, you've known one woman. However, when I do share this, I'm mostly going to intertwine my own story, but it is a common story. So I've sat and listened and journeyed with many, many, many women. So there's a lot of commonalities. So when I share mine, it's commonalities that others have experienced as well. But don't assume that this is going to be the case for your partner. I hope that it might give some opportunity for discussion and to hear their experience and what that was like, which could be quite different, although the themes are probably very similar. I encourage you not to take this as a fix-it manual, or right now I understand, now I know what they do, I can go in there and sort this all out. That's not what this is about. This is just to give you a peer in to the women and their journey. Okay, so the next slide, we've got the infant years for a woman. Now, for me, I was firstborn. So born into a family, 2 parents, a mum, a dad. My mum stopped working when just before I was born and became a stay-at-home mum. My dad was the wage earner, and his career was the one that we followed. What did that mean for me? From the very beginning, for me, it was that we deferred to men. So the man was the wage earner. He was the most important. It wasn't that we weren't important, but we deferred to him. If ever there was going to be a decision made, whatever Dad said, that's what was going to go. So Dad was the one mostly in control. We deferred to him. I then had 2 brothers, and I, from the very beginning, was born with a womb and was a nurturer. So I nurtured, I was 5 when the third baby, my second brother, was born, and I just loved him to bits and nurtured him and mothered him. He slept in my room with me for a while. So I was very much the nurturer and the carer. And I was quite fearful of men. I had some angry men in my life, and men who you did what they said. So I had this kind of fear of men, and this kind of driving always in the background that you defer to men. If men want something, that's what happens, that they get what they want. So they were kind of drivers for me in my family of origin. Now, some of the themes, I guess, that women pick up on is that they're inferior. So for me, it was around, well, we have to defer to Dad. We defer to men. Men are the ones that, you know, they've got the level head, and they're the decision makers. They're the wage earner. They're the most important. So I'm inferior as a female. I'm inferior to them. Even with my brothers, they were going to keep the family surname. And so from very young age, there were certain things that were always going to go to my brothers because they would carry on the family name. They were, in that sense, sort of more important. Weaker, yes. Generally speaking, factually, women are weaker. We're designed differently. We're not as strong, and that comes across too. I'm inferior and I'm weaker than men, and in many senses dependent. I'm dependent on the man, dependent on, in my case initially, dependent on my dad to provide and have that income for me so that I can be clothed and eat, which would be similar also for young boys, but very much dependent on somebody else looking after me. I need to be looked after and cared for. I'm dependent on someone else. And finally, a bit needy as well. So I need that looking after. Ingrained in me right from the beginning was this thing that I need to be looked after. I can't just be independent and out there on my own. I need to have somebody that's looking after me. So these infant years already sitting in the background, almost in our DNA, is this sense for a lot of women that we're inferior, we're weaker, we're dependent, and we're needy on other people and on men to look after us. The next doll that I've got represents the primary and the teen years. Now, probably for me in the primary years, there's not a huge difference to my brothers. We were all subject to my dad. His work meant that we moved around a lot. So we were constantly having to let go of friends and places that we were familiar with and then move to a new area and start all over again. What I did pick up very early on was being the good girl. I was the pleaser in the family. And that's not uncommon for females to sort of take on that role of being good and looking after everyone, getting that sense of what do I need to do in order to keep everyone happy. Well, that was me to a T. And whilst my brothers could go and get up to mischief and make homemade billy carts and fly them down steep hills and so on, I felt much more that I needed to be more reserved and to be good and to make sure everything's kind of happy on the home front. It's not to say that I couldn't have done the billy cart things. It wasn't part of what I wanted to do anyway, but very much that being good, that pleasing. And there was a sense in which it wasn't always safe for me because I was a girl to go out, whereas in some instances for my brothers, because they're boys, that was okay. The real big time of change happens for girls when they get their periods and hormones start to kick in, and that can be anywhere from 10 or 11 to 14, 15. And that is a huge game changer because all of a sudden now I'm on this monthly cycle. So I go up and down and all over the place every month. Now, if I really don't know of anybody that doesn't get affected in some way by periods. So for some, it's premenstrual and very tense and things feel overwhelming to the first few days of bleeding. I was a very heavy bleeder, so there was a lot of embarrassment, needing to go and change products very regularly, and discomfort, cramping, just not feeling great. And hormones, as I was preparing this for the gathering, I realized have really impacted me ever since. It's just always there, and some days feel good and some days feel terrible. And yet we live in a society, maybe not quite as much now as when I was a teenager, but where you're expected to just crack on, just get on with it, which then means PE lessons with heavy periods, feeling very uncomfortable, and in my day wearing what we called scungies, which were just almost underpants over the top of underpants, and feeling really uncomfortable and not safe, I guess, and embarrassed. Having to do exams during periods when you're just really not feeling great, but if that's when the end of semester exams are, that's when you're doing them. So always feeling a little bit like you're behind the eight ball, you compared to a male who can, go into exam hopefully feeling pretty okay. For a female, it can be very hit and miss as to how they're feeling that day. Things can feel incredibly overwhelming and just want to shut down. And then 3 days later, you could face the same set of circumstances and be totally fine with it. So it's very all over the place, very cyclical. And that's really how life continues until in their 50s or so. For the teenagers, appearance. So for females, relationships are hugely important. We're very relational. And in the teen years, particularly, appearance is really, really important because that is how you get your relationships almost. Someone, I don't know who, decides what the fashion is going to be, how you should have your hair, what length should your skirt be, whether you have short socks, long socks, no socks, white sneakers, black sneakers, piercings, no piercings, tattoos, you name it, what sort of makeup, what the makeup looks like. It's quite exhausting. And I'm not sure who decides, but somebody apparently does. And if you aren't presenting in that way, then you will be shunned mostly by those who are in the, we call them the in crowd. So for teenage girls particularly, there's this huge need to kind of conform and to fit in with whatever it is that's been decided is the latest trend at the time. If they don't, then they really face not being part of a community, not being part of that group that they need, that gives them a lot of their identity. So relationships, hugely important, because as women, our identity is a bit all over the place. And a lot of the time, for teenagers in particular, how do they get that identity? It's through relationships. So it's through who are their friends, who are the people in their world. That gives them identity. If I'm in the in crowd, then I've got this identity of I'm cool, I'm accepted, I'm part of whatever's going on at the time. And that is really important for females. You only have to look in the shops. You only have to go to a Westfield or into a Myer or anything to, I don't even have to tell you how important appearance is with the incredible inequity between the amount of clothing on offer for women versus men, and all the other products that are available for women, even from babies. Boy babies have nowhere near the amount of options of clothes as girl babies do. So it's hugely important. I would argue that it continues through life, and appearance can be different things to different women, but I haven't really ever met a woman that isn't concerned by her appearance, even if it's that she wants to wear black to not be noticed, but there'll be something about appearance that will be important to her. So another thing that can happen in those teen years, which certainly happened for me because I wasn't in the in crowd and I never quite got the appearance thing right. Another way is through spiritual, because women have that spiritual, some have that spiritual element, and they look to church or Christianity or a different religion to try and get some sort of identity. So for me, I very much latched onto this whole concept of a Christian woman, and probably had other friends that were a little bit the same. So I looked to church and to a lot of the teaching on Christian women. I became very dependent on God, which I know sounds a bit strange, and that's not unusual. So I can't, as we talked about before, I'm needy. I need protecting. I need someone. So for me, one of those ways was God, but it has a healthy and an unhealthy element to it, where I'm really kind of, God's my emotional happiness program. Like if I do everything right for God, then he'll look after me. So that was certainly quite destructive for me as well, but definitely latched on to a Christian woman. If I'm a Christian woman, then I've got an identity. I'm going places. I know who I am. The 20s to the early 40s. So that's the poem, if you give a mum a muffin. To me, that really sort of sums up for a lot of women what the 20s to early 40s is like. Now, I do realise that younger women today are having children later or not, or smaller families and are definitely pursuing a career as well. So it is a little bit different to when I was growing up, but looking at the demographic of men here tonight, a lot of you would be fitting more into my age group. And I am connected to younger women. I have 5 daughters, ranging from 30 down to 20. So I'm sort of connected in and still notice a lot of what I'm going to talk about is there for them as well. So I've written blood and guts, first of all, because that's kind of what it feels like. I had 8 pregnancies, 3 miscarriages, 5 births, 5 daughters. And so for many, many years, my body was not my own. I'm growing babies and birthing babies, feeling split open. Nothing is private anymore. The body's there for on display, feeding a baby, whether or not by bottle or breast, but there's still things going on there hormonally, bleeding, mastitis, lots of changes in the body as a result of giving birth and of pregnancy. There's also, when raising children, babies, it's poo, it's wee, it's vomit, it's head lice, it's conjunctivitis, it's skin rashes, it's all sorts of things. So there's a lot of what I call blood and guts going on that women are kind of working with, both in their own body and then with their children. It's a very reactive time. When you've got young children, it's very difficult to kind of control your world. It's whatever's going on at the time. You could plan to do an outing and then find you've got sick children, so you can't go. So I tended to, it's just kind of going with what is at the time, rather than being able to plan and have really definitive things that you think you might be going to do. It's a letting go time this season. It's very busy, 20s to early 40s. Lots of letting go. Now, this can be in so many different ways. For some women, they're not able to have children. And so that's a huge grief and a letting go of an expectation that they thought when they were growing up. Some people don't want to. They're still letting go of other people's expectations for them. Some people have children and wish they didn't, and there's letting go of what they thought they might have versus what they do have. Letting go when children are born, if that happens. Letting go of my right to do whatever I like. Letting go of my right to sleep through the night, maybe, and then letting go of those little ones. So they're born, I've let go of that from nurturing it in my womb, and then all the milestones that come. So letting go from feeding them, letting go when they're big enough to go to preschool or school, and lots of little steps in between. So whilst they have this beautiful baby, there's all this mess, and there's always letting go happening really from the minute they're born. Serving women serving their children, their husband, often doing volunteer work, which I did. So volunteering for various places, whether it be in preschools and schools or churches or a myriad of anything their children are involved with, they'll probably end up volunteering in as well. So it's a real time of serving and sacrifice. So we sacrifice a lot of our own wants and needs in order to look after and nurture our families. It's also a time to treasure and nurture. So there is so much to treasure. There would be times when I would just sneak into a baby's room and just watch them sleeping and just treasure that in my heart. And that is something for the feminine, I guess, is to really treasure those special little moments that come along. And I've heard many mums say that the child can be exasperating, and then they go to sleep and they look at that gorgeous face and just treasure it, and yep, they can go on. Very nurturing, obviously, looking after them, very aware of their needs and what's going on in their life, and nurturing those children. There's guilt. Most women I know experience guilt. Now, there's a myriad here. So the woman that goes, that stays at home might feel guilty that she's not able to work, or not, you know, whatever her work was before was helping other people, and guilt that she's not doing that anymore. There can be guilt around how much time she's spending with her children if she is following a career, guilt that she's not spending more time with her family, or guilt that she's not able to put into her career as much as she would like. Guilt from every angle is certainly something that many women experience. It can be a really lonely time, even though women are incredibly relational, and through all of this, they are trying to maintain relationships with friends, with family, with spouse, with children, whatever their network is, that is so important for them, and they will want to be maintaining that. But there are lonely moments. For the woman that has a child with special needs or difficulties, it can be incredibly lonely. It can be incredibly lonely watching other mothers who have what appear to be healthy, normal children going about their business, and knowing that that's never going to be how it is for a mum. So it can be very lonely. It's lonely in the night. Can be lonely at home during the day, just with children. I certainly found that at times it's very demanding, and there's no other adult to kind of bounce things off, and you feel separated from, I guess, the workforce as such, and a little bit sort of left out. Competitive. So women tend to be more passive aggressive. And as I said before about appearance, this sort of passive aggressiveness can come in the 20s to 40s. So, well, you know, you couldn't get enough milk supply, so you've had to bottle feed. That's okay. But it's said in this kind of way of, actually, you haven't quite made it as a mum. So there's this sense of women have the ideal of what they think a mum should be. And when they fall short of that, they can feel quite a lot of shame and feel like a failure. And that sort of competitiveness of, well, my child slept through the night since they were born, you know, how come yours hasn't? It's there. It's underlying a lot of the time. I'm back in my size 8 jeans 3 hours after the birth of my baby. You know, look at me. And someone else is struggling. So it can be quite competitive. And for women, particularly if they're, I think the mothering side of things can feel quite undervalued by society. I don't necessarily mean by their husbands or partners, but society doesn't value what we do. When I tell you, you know, I deal with vomit and poo and wee and head lice today, well, you don't kind of listen to that and go, wow, that's amazing. You think, oh, glad I'm not her. So it's not valued. Often when I would take my 5 daughters somewhere, I would get quite negative looks from people. What are you doing here? Here's trouble. You know, a mum with all these children, they're going to be unruly, and that's not, you know, acceptable here. So the role it can feel quite undervalued. The Christian woman stuff for me, that really became quite debilitating, I suppose, in that time, because I was striving to try and be this perfect Christian mum and perfect Christian wife, and it really undid me, and I crashed. But it felt like I was never good enough, and I had to do more, and I had to do more. And so that can be quite challenging for some women, not all, but that spiritual aspect for me, and that kind of, I guess it fed into my, the teaching and so on, fed into my, I've got to be better, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. And yeah, it really became way too heavy to carry for me. Okay, so the 40s. Midlife crises. So women tend to have sort of more smaller ones rather than the male, the real big one. However, they certainly do have them. Loss of sense of purpose and loss of meaning. So we've poured our life into all these relationships in the 20s to 40s around family, if we've had one. We've poured a lot into that, and it's a lot of giving, giving, giving. And our lives become kind of really centered around taking this one to gymnastics and this one to school and this to this to this to this to this. That's what it becomes. And as I alluded to before, often women end up volunteering in these organisations that their children are involved with, extracurricular or school or whatever. Now, what happens when they become teenagers and they start to leave home? So my purpose is gone because I've been this life support system for my daughters, and suddenly they, as teenagers, they're pushing back now. They don't come up and give mum big hugs. They're pushing back on that now. They're trying to find their own place. And so I haven't, my meaning's gone. Like, this is what I was living for, was to do this. And I had one of my little crises was one day when I realized that I'd been totally kidding myself. All along, I'd been saying that I, was pouring out unconditional love and I love my daughters and do all the right Christian stuff and whatever, then they're going to love me and it's just going to be beautiful and we're going to have this wonderful relationship as they get older. And I had this epiphany. There was no unconditional love there. That was so conditional. I was pouring out my love into them so that when they got older, they'd love me back. And they'd pat me on the back and say, you were a great mum. You were so good. And we'd have this great relationship. And I had to come to a place of accepting, of letting them go. Again, letting them go and not having my meaning come from them. That's quite a journey. I'm still on it, of allowing them to be who they are, independent women on their own journey. They're their own people, their own journey now. And if they have a relationship with me, that's wonderful, but also being okay if that's not something that they want and letting them decide what that looks like. So that's quite huge for women. And that is certainly something where I see women land in the counselling room over this loss of purpose and meaning, and this child that I was training up to be this, and now they want to be that, and that doesn't fit. And what do I do with all of that? Alongside of that then comes, well, who am I? Who actually is Janet? Who am I? And who has kept me? There's a lot of rage there. I've been this life support system for 20 odd years, and now they're going off to do what they do. I've supported my husband in his career, so he's got where he needed to be. But well, who am I? And what have I got? Who am I? And that is a big question that many women face and come to counselling. So counselling is the most popular for women 40s to 50s, is the most common time for women to seek out somebody because they've hit this point, they have some time now, and there's this big question, who am I? Because I've just been for 20 odd years just embedded in family, and suddenly I'm not there. That's not for me anymore. So who am I and who has kept me from myself? There's a new desire for wholeness and selfhood. So for me and for others, okay, I want to now discover who am I and what is my life all about. For me, fortunately, that's when I landed in Rob Jones' office. So he was able to mentor me and journey with me, and his ongoing journey with me around those issues. Okay, so 50 to 65, we bring it all together. we've got 3 alternatives. So this is a little bit like men. So we've got that embittered journey, where I don't transform anything. I'm bitter, negative, and ultimately despairing. Or I can ascend, but I'm full of rage and opinions. I like the term the witch on the broom. I think we all know them. So I've got a lot to say. I've got a lot of opinions and I'm riding off on my broom, and I'll let you know. But I'm not actually, haven't actually done that beautiful inner work that Centre for Men is, what a Centre for Men is all about. The other option is the wise woman, the holy fool. So now I'm going to bring together my journey, and I've got strength, and I've also got the vulnerability, and I've got wisdom, and I can lead and I can follow. And I know what I know, and I might not be as good about how I say it, but I do know I've got a good, strong knowing on the inside. And now I'm a wise woman, a woman who's done her work. And as she's ascending, ideally, that's when the man's descending. So there's my 5 little babushka dolls. And if we do the work beautifully well, the weaving in of all the different times in our life and all of what's happened, hopefully you're familiar with babushka dolls. They fit inside each other. So I've got the 5, but then they're all nestled now into the one bigger babushka doll. And that's our wise woman who can lead and partner and follow and has plenty to offer. Okay, I might hand it over to Paul. Do you want to do questions or break off, or what would you like to do?
Oh, thank you so much for that, Janet. And that was super interesting, super helpful. Yeah, just thank you for sharing your story, and I know I personally took a lot out of that, and yeah, just very much appreciated. It's left me lots to think about. I think it might be good. We might just do a short um, opportunity in small groups just to reflect and listen to each other's processing, and then come back with some questions from there. Does that sound all right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wonderful. So I might put us again in those same breakout rooms, and we're going to spend no more than again, just offer a short kind of prompt and maybe one round of reflection. I guess the question that we want you to look at is, what is your take home from the women's journey that is different to your own journey, and how has that impacted you tonight? So I'll say that again. What is your take home from the women's journey that Janet's shared, and how is that different to your own journey, and what's that impacted on you tonight? Cool. So we'll open up into the groups. We'll have, again, just 6 or 7 minutes just to kind of chat together, and then we will join together for some questions and see people on their way. Thanks so much. If you could join your groups now, that'd be Just wait a moment while those groups join together. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining back in. Hopefully your times of sharing were helpful. It'd be great if you're around and able to come on camera. It'd be great. If you're busy and you can't, that's fine too. Before we finish up tonight, I just wanted to offer anyone an opportunity. If you have a question, but Janet, there's something to come up or something you'd like to share, you can either put it in the chat or you can just ask it, come off mute now and go ahead from there. Thanks. Anyone want to kick us off?
It's Andrew here. Janet, thanks so much for what you did. Actually, one of the fellows in the breakout room said something which I just missed, which I'll ask you about. Said that a comment you'd made at the gathering. I've been commuting and I'm just home now, so it was something about like the difference between women in the past, whenever that was, and now. So I suppose the general question is, has this female spiritual journey remained, as far as we know, pretty much in the structure that you presented across cultures throughout recorded history? That's a big one. But or how much shifting has there been in this, as far as we know?
Good question. I couldn't comment across cultures. What I would say is that there's definitely a shift with the next generation of young women. I've got 5 daughters from 30 down to 20, and their experience, there is still definitely threads of similarity, but there is also differences. As we were discussing in our breakout room, probably when I look at sort of my mum and my grandma and my great-grandma, it's quite, our experience was probably quite similar, but with my daughters, I see quite a different experience emerging. I'm actually going to be attending the Women's Rites of Passage in America with Paula Darcy in September, and I'm hopeful that I'm going to get a little bit more of an insight into that, because definitely some of their journey now is probably more ascent in terms of having a career. Some women are choosing not to have families or waiting a lot longer. I definitely, in my offspring, things are different to the way they were for me. And I've had to really have a heart change there, from being not adamant that they needed to be stay-at-home mums, but I was quite adamant that I would not be minding children so that they could follow a career. That's me bearing my all my ugliness, that I've done my time, and now it's their time. But I've had some heart surgery, metaphorically speaking, on that, and do understand and emerging and understanding that actually for their generation, they do need to have a career. And I do now mind, one of my daughters has got 2 children, and I mind them one day a week so that she can continue with her career that she's invested a lot in. And I didn't actually touch on it, but what has happened, and I see it quite a lot for women in their 50s, and certainly something that I faced, they've been stay-at-home mums. They've hit, not that when I speak to that, I meant I've faced the issue, not that I've actually, this has happened to me, but, facing divorce or so on, and realize they have no capacity to earn a decent income because they've been out of the workforce for so long. And that is a real issue and fear. And I think that fear is driving younger women, as well as the need to kind of be able to be who they are and express that however that looks. So yeah, there is definite change, and I can't speak to exactly what that looks like in terms of journey, but does that help or not?
It certainly does, thank you. And I don't want to hog the show, but I'm wondering whether that creates issues for, say, broadly speaking, your generation, whether your generation, terrible generalization here, but whether they welcome that and say they're so delighted for their offspring, their female offspring, or whether it creates a bit of a crisis of, I don't know, envy or resentment in that age. I could understand that if that was the case.
I definitely felt resentment. Hang on, how come they get to go and have their careers and I didn't? So I definitely felt that, and that was part of my hard heart. So it was definitely something that I had to work through myself over that. What was I going to say? Something else popped up then when you were talking. But also there's a sadness for a lot of women my age that the younger generation are so either the children are in daycare or they're so reliant on Google and social media, they don't actually look to the older women for some help and I guess the mentoring. It used to always be the women's business, I suppose. And I've come across so many women my age that are grieving because they're not actually included in the sort of grandchildren process like it used to be. So there's a lot of change from all of the social media and connection that way, as well as the career. Lots and lots of differences now as well. So our role is to kind of process our own pain and not project it. And then how do we support them and as women, help them in their journey.
That is so helpful. Thank you so much.
Maybe time for one more or one or two more questions. Quick. I just want to acknowledge that Noel put a comment in the chat about whether it's okay for the slides to be shared. Janet, are you happy for us to send them around with a link?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem.
Beautiful. I'll do that when I send it out.
Janet, thanks for describing what I think was very much my mother's life and part of my wife's life. What's the role for men now at the moment to shift that power imbalance and subjugation of women within both religious and non-religious relationships?
Sorry, I just missed the last bit of what you said. Within,
both within the faith community, but also the non-faith community. I mean, it's incumbent on men to shift for my daughter's sake and my granddaughter's sake.
That's a really big question. It's something my husband and I have talked about a lot, and it's a tricky one because I think it requires all of us. It's not just men. It requires all of us to kind of journey together. I have experienced many men that are incredibly empowering of women, and so I guess that's why I started with, I'm not a man hater, because I've certainly seen that, and I've rubbed shoulders with some horrific women that are, have done no journey and are very witches on their brooms. And so I wouldn't ever want to put it in the camp of, well, it's up to men to sort this out. To me, it's everyone, but it's definitely that I guess the empowering language, if we're talking about younger girls, that empowering language, that their qualities, and that they are certainly up for that, but not to take away from, because I think we can swing too far the other way, that some women want to be mums, and empowering that as well, that's good and helpful, and that it because a lot of those women that are staying at home and stay-at-home mums really do feel quite second-class citizen, and well, you're not good for anything else, so that's what you're going to do. So the empowering them, I guess, for what is it that's theirs to do, and all of it's important as well. I don't feel like I'm answering your question very well. I'm sorry. It's just a really big
No, it was a big ask.
question.
It was a big ask. I know.
Yeah. If anyone else has got something else to offer in that space, I'd be grateful.
Yeah, I do like what you said about the language we use. I think the language we use as men is incredibly powerful. As fathers and as partners. Yeah.
And I think there's a huge change, as I said before, in the next generation. I'm very fortunate. I've got a gorgeous son-in-law and other daughters with partners, and I love every one of them to bits. And they're just the loveliest guys, and they really, you can see a difference. Like, they really respect and want to see my daughters thrive. And I guess my daughters are quite feisty. They want what they want in terms of their career or whatever. And you know, they're 100% behind. So I do feel like there is a shift from maybe when I was in my 20s, and not all men, but some were quite chauvinistic, and I don't see that in, I guess, at least the young guys that I'm hanging around. I see very much them wanting to empower and see that they, you know, my daughters have just as much to offer.
Well, I really appreciated that question, Dave, and your response, Janet. And I'm just suggesting in the chat box that that question of the healing of gender relations would be a good thing to kick around later in the year. Maybe get Richard back and you, Janet. For me, I think the gender relations wound is key to the breakdown of the social fabric. And I think that we have something to offer in those of us with a faith foundation and with a redemptive framework have something to offer, something gracious to offer. So I'd like to see Centre for Men and Families take up that challenge. It's a biggie, but I reckon it's, you know, time to kick it around a bit. And I want to be part of that, even though I'm in the West.
Well, these conversations are right. These spaces are right for those conversations, I think. And Noel, perhaps we could have you on that panel alongside Janet and Richard and whoever else to maybe, throw those thoughts around, and it'll be a really helpful conversation. I'll take you up on that if you can. That'd be very special. Thank you everyone for your time this evening, and Janet, a big thank you from all of us for your honesty and your depth and vulnerability that you shared of your own journey, and opening up us all to the way, the things that many women are going through that lots of men are oblivious to. So I just want to thank you for sharing your story. I found a beautiful quote about stories, and by Clarissa Pinkola Estes, who wrote a very famous book on this kind of journey called Women Who Run with Wolves, which is, I don't know if you've read that, Janet, or heard of it, but it's quite an interesting book. And she says, I hope you will go out and let stories, that is life, happen to you, and that you will work with these stories from your life, not someone else's life, your life. Water them with your blood and tears and your laughter till they bloom, till you yourself burst into bloom. That is the work. That's the only work. Thank you, everyone.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for your sharing, and we look forward to being together again. Our next evening is July 18th, and we'll have final details, but it will likely be Robert Grimes sharing. So that's will be exciting for us all. Thanks, everyone. Feel free to stick around. I'm going to stop the recording now. And
Thanks, fellas.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.